So what might be some red flags that a business owner can watch for when they're being contacted or when they're in negotiations with a buying group?
Yeah, so that's again super tricky and very deal specific, but there are some common themes where a seller can, with some level of certainty, assure themselves that this might not meet the smell test. For starters, a buyer who's unwilling to sign a non-disclosure agreement. And we've seen where buyers get super defensive in those types of situations, and the seller is worried that they're putting up a potential roadblock, especially if you're now excited about the prospect of selling your business and starting to already count the dollars. From the seller's perspective, it's important to know a buyer who is legitimate is going to expect a non-disclosure agreement. They're going to expect you to want to protect your information and keep that confidential.
Right. So that's actually, even if it's not worth, I've heard people say NDAs aren't worth the paper they're signed on, but it's actually a barrier and a vetting piece.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I think if you're not bringing that forward as a seller, most buyers will bring it themselves because they know that it's a part of the process. So you don't need to keep arguing.
Too, if they don't come with it and they don't volunteer it,
absolutely,
even right there,
yeah,
that could be a red flag.
For sure. And from the seller's side, again, someone that's not willing to do that, or if you think you're going to throw the transaction totally off the rails, I would say if someone's not willing to sign, it's probably the best course anyway.
Okay.
Yeah.
And let's talk about funding sources.
Yeah.
Red flags in finances.
So again, that's another way to tell. A buyer should be able to express to you how they plan on financing the acquisition. It's an important piece of the puzzle. It's not the only piece of the puzzle, but it's something that you as a seller need to have comfort over before you get too far down the path and start signing agreements that now you're locked into. Making sure that you understand what their financial picture looks like, how they propose to fund the acquisition. Are there, again, multiple components to that? Is there going to be a piece of seller financing or an earnout that's tied into the transaction to reach the ultimate purchase price? A buyer that can explain to you how they plan on acquiring you, that's a bit of a red flag for sure.
And so we've seen an expression of interest used actually before a letter of intent.
Yeah.
And sometimes that can be quite useful. So give us some examples of when that might be used.
Yeah, I think, with the expression of interest, if the buyer's coming forward with that as the initial document, it's helpful from the seller's perspective to understand what are some of the deal terms that are important to the buyer. It's also an opportunity before you go too far down the path and invest a bunch of capital with your legal advisors or other advisors to express to the buyer what factors are important to you on the deal. But typically an expression of interest should specify, do they need a financing condition? Are they planning on paying for it in cash, all cash deal at closing? Is there some other, potential piece of the funding involved with respect to, earnouts, or is there seller financing, or are they wanting you to take equity back in the deal and stay involved as a shareholder? So multiple ways to understand that. Yeah.
So it can be sort of used to set expectations between the parties or softly kind of extract some of the thought process going on for either party.
It'll at least give you a sense of whether or not you're on the same page, or able to get to the same page, and if there's a overall meeting of the minds at that early stage.
And are expression of interest used in every deal, some deals that you see? How often do you see them?
Yeah, some deals. I wouldn't say they're used in every deal. I think it's more common NDA, LOI, then you roll into due diligence, and then ultimately the definitive agreement and the rest of the closing documents.
Could it be a red flag if the buyer's not willing to do an offer letter, a more formal letter of intent, or if they're not willing to do an expression of interest? Can that be a red flag?
I would think so. I think some buyers, if they're being too pushy, if they're trying to move too quickly through the process, that's a red flag. It's a big financial commitment, so the buyer should want to take their steps and do their due diligence before acquiring you. And someone that's wanting to just fast track that, you got to wonder, are they just kicking tires? Is this for real? It can be exciting from the seller's perspective, obviously, but I think you gotta be weary of that, because you might be locking yourself into a definitive agreement with a party that then it's really hard to walk back and exit. Yeah.
I know we ask a lot of these pre-vetting questions when we take on a client at Village Wellth, so we'll catch a lot of this in our onboarding process.
Yeah.
But not every business owner has someone else vetting their buyers for them. So really important to have the lawyer involved at that point as well to help in this. And what we've seen really helpful is when the lawyers start to talk to each other as well, so that can give more assurance to the business owner,
Right.
because they know that their lawyer is talking to the other party's lawyer, and that in itself shows some verification of authenticity.
Yeah, absolutely. It's definitely a step towards legitimizing the process when both parties have legal counsel involved. But again, also benefit of working with, the Village Wellth platform is, knowing and having those assurances that the buyer has been vetted, there is funding sources in place or able to be accessed, where capital won't become a hurdle, hopefully. And then, it helps move things along quicker and smoothly.
Yeah. What do you think is people should put on how much should you trust your gut? How much of this is gut instinct?
Yeah, extremely important. For a business owner, selling a business can be a very sensitive thing. And then it's also important not to get caught up in the emotion and the wave and just, wanting to get to the finish line too quickly. If the negotiations are strained, or if from the prospective buyer's side, sometimes the story is inconsistent or things just don't feel like they're lining up or not making sense. Oh, I have financing. You don't have to worry about that. Oh, actually, financing fell through. I need to go back and talk to another party, or we're working with this private investor.
I'll get it for you.
Yeah, right. It's hard. And if they're not able to furnish some of those documents that you want to see for your own, due diligence and satisfaction as a seller, again, a lot of those are red flags. But, I think it's important to be mindful for a seller to know that sometimes the best deal is the one that you don't make. And I think sellers feel like, they're pot committed once they sign an NDA and an LOI, and that's absolutely not the case. It's very common that deals fall off the table and don't close. So, you're not going to be the only one that goes down this process and doesn't close. Yeah.
But I think the learnings from it can be priceless.
Invaluable, for sure.
Yeah, it's certainly not priceless in all situations.
Yeah.
Can be invaluable
sometimes,
sometimes, but you can stage gate when you kind of put more expenses into things. But as far as like going through this process of buying and selling or getting partial way through the process is the learnings. Invaluable.
And it's absolutely okay to walk away, and that's, to your point, you have to trust your gut in those situations. If it's not meeting the smell test, something doesn't feel right, it's okay to walk away. And, if you were wrong about that, there's nothing stopping you from re-engaging with the party at a later date. So maybe the buyer just wasn't ready at that time. Maybe it's important for the buyer to go away and get more prepared to complete an acquisition, so that then it's a smoother, streamlined path to closing, because it can become very time consuming and emotionally draining for a seller to go through that process. And if it continues to drag on and the story keeps changing, or the financing condition or the due diligence condition,
or
waiver,
market condition,
but the waiver date keeps getting kicked out longer and longer. Oh, I need an extension. And the LOI just keeps getting extended indefinitely. That's taxing for a seller to continue to run their business and operate it the way that it was, to make sure that it continues to thrive as a going concern while also doing this. And then, not to mention the fees that you're paying your lawyer or your accountant or your other advisors continue to add up in the background as well.
We've seen it where we brought a buyer to a party and not to a party, but to another party. And at the time they said, we're not going to engage in this conversation right now. But months down the road, we actually get a call back from them saying like, hey, we thought about it and we're actually ready. So things change, seasons change.
Yeah, timing is everything with this
Yeah.
as well. So it's important to make sure that it's the right time for you too.
Right time. It's got to feel right. Gut check.
Yes.
And all the pieces.
All
in
important
place.
things to remember, for sure.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
Well, thanks so much for being here with us and having this conversation.
Thanks for having me.
We look forward to more conversations.
Thank you.